Thank you, Governor O'Malley, for sitting down with me
man.
and with Little Village and PATV for this interview.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks. So we're going to start right now talking about gun control. In recent weeks and months, the world has been rocked by violent crime. Most recently here in America, there was a massacre in San Bernardino. Americans are 20 times more likely to be murdered with guns than people in other developed countries. What kind of gun reform do we need in this country?
We need common sense gun reform. I mean, there are people massacred almost every single day, more than one for every day so far this year. Hopefully, out of this horrible tragedy in San Bernardino, perhaps we'll wake up as a nation and realize that when we make it easier than any other nation on the planet for anyone to buy a combat assault weapon and cop killer bullets, that we're not acting in a responsible way when it comes to protecting human life and the dignity of every person, which we hold as a core belief. So, look, in my own state, I brought people together to pass comprehensive gun safety legislation that had a few components. Universal background checks with fingerprinting and licensing for new guns, a ban on combat assault weapons, and also a ban on the sale of weapons or magazines with more than 10 rounds in them. Mm-hmm. And I believe that as a nation, that we need to enact common sense measures like this, and in the meantime, we should encourage every state to move forward and do it. And I also believe that we need to use the buying power of our federal government to insist on the highest and best safety technology. We're the largest purchaser of weapons in the country, is our own government. We should insist on the serial numbers that can't be effaced, and also from micro-stamping of rounds.
Sure.
So that's what I'm in favor of, and I think there's a growing consensus for it, but we need to continue to push for it.
You talked about what you were able to do in your home state as governor, and you had some big successes with comprehensive gun reform. It's likely that the next president, if a Democrat, will face Republican majorities in Congress. And in your state, when you passed a lot of this, a lot of these measures on gun reform, you had Democratic majorities in your state legislature. How would you plan to work with a divided government if you were president in enacting gun reform?
Yeah, and some of the stiffest opposition I had to the gun reform was within my own party, was rural legislators, some of them very senior, and in leadership positions within my own party. And some of the other things we got done in Maryland, marriage equality, repealing the death penalty, I was only able to accomplish because of some Republican votes. So one of the differences in this race between myself and the other two candidates for the Democratic Party's nomination is that my background is that of an executive. I was a mayor of a big city with big divisions, not along party, but along race and class and place. But I brought people together to get things done. I did the same thing in our state, in a state that's regarded as America in miniature, where a lot of Democrats find themselves voting Republican in general elections or not even turning out. So there's no easy button to it, but what you have to do as an executive is make sure you call the legislature all the time. You have to look for opportunities to break bread and create social settings so that you maintain that ability to talk with one another and not past each other. And we've been through divided times like this before. We'll come through this one. But I do believe our nation needs new leadership to pull us back together and remember what we have in each other.
One of the biggest criticisms leveled at President Obama is that he's been unable to bring both sides of the aisle together to really enact sweeping change where it's needed. How are you going to do that differently than President Obama? As he ran on the campaign promise of hope and change, has he delivered on that?
President Obama unleashed a lot of goodness throughout our country with his historic election. I mean, I visit classrooms, and my daughter teaches, in fact, in first grade in Baltimore City. And what President Obama's election has done for the goodness within our country, you can't really put a measure to. But President Obama's historic election also allowed a lot of congresspeople in gerrymandered districts to act in very unreasonable and obstructionist ways, the likes of which we haven't seen in modern memory. So every Congress, though, is different. Sometimes we think that we're going to be saddled with this same Republican Congress forever, and we're not. Every 2 years we have the ability to change, and we're going to have redistricting on our horizon in 2020. And in the meantime, I'm going to do what I've done before as an executive, which is to realize that you can't ever give up, that any vote that you come up short on is an opportunity to figure out where the votes are that you need for the next time. A lot of the things I got done in Maryland, Stacey, I did not get done the first try. It took me 3 times to pass marriage equality. It took me 3 times to repeal the death penalty. It took me a couple times to pass the DREAM Act. But I never gave up. And that's what you need to do as an executive, and that's what I intend to do.
In the wake of these shootings in San Bernardino in particular, coupled with a lot of international hysteria, if you will, a lot of it rightfully deserved, at the emerging threat of ISIS, there seems to be an unfortunate feeling of Islamophobia sweeping the country, and a lot of it seems to be promulgated by prominent GOP candidates. The New York Times reported just a bit ago that Donald Trump has called for the banning of Muslims from entering the country until we figure out, I don't know what the language to use, but he called for that. Is the GOP in 2015 experiencing xenophobia right now?
Push back against this. I mean, this plays Donald Trump's language on this. Saying things like, cut off our borders to any Muslims. Who's the one to start with? Muslim Americans in the armed forces wearing the uniform of the United States that came from home. Engineers, men and women that are the face of the United States doing business in this global economy. It's a pretty outrageous language, and it's right in the hands of Muslims. Because what actually wants is for this to be framed as a conflict between Islam and Western democracies. And Donald Trump is playing right into it, and all of us need to push back against it. I hope that the Republican Party discovers itself, because when Donald Trump says things like this, he is not reflecting the party of Abraham Lincoln, who constantly reminded us of the firm icon of humanity.
I want to kind of draw out a point that you were starting to make here and give you this sort of analogy. It's been said that Muslims are to organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda what white Christians are to the KKK, if you follow this line of reasoning. Is America above the criticism that we too have within our own borders religious fanatics who don't practice Islam, but rather practice an extreme and contorted version of a Judeo-Christian religion?
I would say this. The reason why I prefer to use the term violent jihadists is that I don't want to bless their violence with the name of a great world religion any more than I want to call that young band that shot up all of those innocent folks in Emmanuel Church in Charleston a Christian.
Right.
That act is not a Christian act. That act was an act of domestic terror, as this was an act of terror. And I would not want to dignify it by giving it the label Christian any more than I would want to dignify what happened in San Bernardino by calling it an act in the name of Islam.
So words and phrases matter, and that kind of segues into our next topic. When I first heard this question asked, it was asked by a Drake University Law School student at the first Democratic debate in Vegas. And he asked the questions, do Black lives matter or do all lives matter? And we have seen an evolution amongst several candidates on this very sensitive issue for many Americans. So I want to ask a question to you just like that. Do Black lives matter or do all lives matter?
Yeah, this is the language of public discourse. For hundreds of years in our country, we have devalued Black lives. And so the important point that the Black Lives Matter movement is making is that they want all of us to acknowledge that, in fact, we have devalued the lives of people of color in the United States of America. In terms of the economy we construct, the structural employment we allow to continue to exist, in many areas of our city and also in our criminal justice system. And yes, Black Lives Matter. There is a group that tried to push back and repudiate them by saying the simple phrase, all lives matter. The truth is that the most important value we share as a people is our belief in the dignity of every single person. And I think those of us who are running to heal and to bring people together have to be mindful of the way that language can sometimes be claimed. And I said myself at a forum to the Black Lives Matter people that all lives matter. And then I later apologized because they took offense to the fact that I was appearing to dismiss the important truth that we have undervalued Black lives. When I ran for mayor of Baltimore, we used to say in a different way, which is that in our city there's no such thing as a spare American. And I challenged our state legislature as a young mayor. Mm-hmm. I said, if young, poor white men were dying in the numbers, that young, poor black men were dying in these numbers, we would be calling out the National Guard to reclaim safety in our neighborhoods. So, you know, the truth is we have undervalued Black lives, mm-hmm. and we need to acknowledge that as a people.
You mentioned that you apologize to Black Lives Matter activists. Did you apologize because, as you said, you offended them, or did you apologize because you had an evolution on your position of Black Lives Matter and their movement?
I apologize because I inadvertently offended them.
Okay. All right. So I want to move on. And
I represented in Baltimore, by the way, a majority African-American district for 2 terms on the Baltimore City Council. I've been very, very near to a lot of very sad and violent scenes, and have attended probably more funerals, line of duty funerals of police officers, black and white. I'm very, very close to the pain and the grief that are intertwined in our racial history and our drive to improve criminal justice and public safety and make real the promise of equal protection under the law. It's part of my DNA. It is the fabric of my city and my life.
I want to move on to talk about the fact that we are perhaps the closest we've ever come in this nation to electing a woman to the presidency. That's important to many people. It would be historic, and millions of girls and women could see a reflection of themselves in the most powerful job in the world. What do you say to the voters who so desperately want to see a woman elected to the presidency, and what can you provide to these American voters, specifically women voters that support Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, well, look, ours is a representative democracy, and there are many issues that go into a person's decision as to who they support as their next president. I look forward to seeing a woman as president of the United States, but I believe in these times that I offer what our country needs right now in the office of President of the United States. We win elections by offering a framework for the future, not a framework for the past. When the Youth Caucus was held here in Iowa with boys and girls of a high school age, Secretary Clinton came in dead last, came in 3rd out of 3 candidates. So considerations of ethnic affinity or gender affinity, all of those things are very important, and awareness of the historical milestones or glass ceilings that need to be broken and passed so we can have a more inclusive society. All of those things are very, very important. So too is new leadership, the ability to get things done and to understand the changing nature of warfare and this world in which we find ourselves. So look, the beauty is candidates offer, the people decide. Mm-hmm. But I am betting that the people of our country are looking for a new leader, and they're not putting barriers on their search according to gender or race.
You mentioned new leadership, and you mentioned different strategies and approaches to warfare. Currently, one of the issues that is getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, in this presidential debate is the situation in Syria and ISIS. In the first debate held in Las Vegas, you mentioned that you were opposed to implementing a no-fly zone in Syria. This position puts you at odds with the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Why do you think no-fly zones are a bad idea? And why do you think the best way forward, what do you think the best way forward for America is in regards to Syria and ISIS?
Yeah, this is one difference of opinion among many that I have with Secretary Clinton, but I find myself in the company of current military leaders in our own government who believe that a no-fly zone is not advisable at this time. A no-fly zone, especially with the Russian Air Force in the air over Syria, would escalate the risk of a sort of Cold War type of confrontation that is not that's not worth the potential benefits. ISIL does not have an air force, and a no-fly zone at this point, given the exodus of so many Syrian refugees, I don't believe serves a good purpose, and I think it actually increases the risk, and that's what other members of the military currently serving believe as well.
So what do you do? What's your strategy?
Look, our strategy is that I think President Obama was right last night when he said that we have to learn the lessons of these past 15 years, which is that sending in big divisions of, American Marines and fighting a 10-year war where we occupy an entire country is not the way to go. It actually encourages and helps recruitment. If the casualties we're taking off the battlefield are outnumbered by the number of new recruits, then we're not winning. So we have a role to play here, but we have to do it in coalition with the other nations of that region. And those nations who find their front doors at the, right there at the scene are the ones that are going to have to step forward and offer some of the ground troops for this. There's no substitute for an Iraqi army that's actually functional and that doesn't run away, that actually gets paid and is not purged of Sunni members. So these are mistakes that we've made in the past, but for the future, what we need to do is provide, I support the President in providing special operations advisors. I believe that we need to provide the close air support, but I also believe that we need to do this in coalition with other nations. And that's the frustrating thing about this conflict. There are many say who just go in and send in the 3rd Division of Marines and just take care of business. Well, we did that in Afghanistan, and it still didn't take care of business entirely. We did that in Iraq. We toppled Saddam Hussein. We disbanded the Iraqi army, and then we created the vacuum out of which that ISIL has filled. So this longer type of war is going to be frustrating for us as we learn to adjust here. But the President said something else very important last night, and that is that we need to learn to adapt more quickly than the threat adapts. And that's really the crux of this new national security strategy and new foreign policy strategy. And I'll tell you what, Stacey, we are not going to make this change by resorting to sort of old leadership of the type that Hillary Clinton represents, where we imagine that the toppling of every dictator leads automatically to more stability and a better situation. It does not. Nor are we going to solve our problems by grabbing for the big military tool in all of these instances. We need to be smarter. We need to play a longer game. We need to play a more collaborative game. And yet we also need to act sooner when it comes to preventing safe havens from developing to a point where it becomes a kinetic threat and strikes are launched against Western democracies. And that's what we have here now. So we need to pick up the battle tempo in Syria and Iraq. We need to apply a whole of government approach. And then here in our own country, we need to improve our capacity to share intelligence, to piece together and connect the dots, and to share intelligence between federal, state, and local to make sure these fusion centers in every state are actually real and following up on leads.
So we only have a few more minutes. So I want to get in a few more questions as well. I want to think more conceptually about the issue of terror and the battle of terror. Now, several presidents in the modern era have had their shots at dismantling terrorist organizations, whether they manifest themselves as Al-Qaeda or as ISIS or what have you. The Bush administration's had a shot at it, the Clinton administration's had a shot at it, and the Obama administration's had a shot at it. How do you
And the Obama administration was very successful at one iteration of global terror, which was taking out Osama bin Laden. But
is this about just killing people who commit terrorist acts? Is there a smarter way we can go about winning the war on terror?
I believe that we need to dial up, as thinking and caring people and intelligent people on this planet, the role of sustainable development. One of the very positive moves forward in recent years that most of us haven't learned much about is the Millennium Development Goals set by the UN. The number of people that have been moved out of poverty by the availability of simple things like clean water and other building blocks of a stable society. This is what we need to learn to do better in coordination with other nations of this planet. We put way too much on our men and women in uniform when we wait till stuff goes so bad that we're having debates about whether or not to send in the Marines. We need to be much more engaged with like-minded people around this world. We need to focus on doing our part in sustainable development. If people are able to feed their kids, if people are able to work hard with the hope that they're going to give their kids a safer and healthier future, it's much harder for terrorist organizations like ISIL to recruit desperate young men to their ranks. And that's a piece of this. We need to be a little bit more like the Chinese in the sense that we take a longer view here. You can't create democracy just by waving a wand or toppling a dictator.
Mm-hmm. I want to move on to get to some questions about contrast here. Hillary Clinton has been relatively slow to take positions on some pretty big issues this election cycle, most notably her very late opinion on the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, and other issues that are particularly meaningful to the liberal base of the party. Does her slow, deliberative process signal to you the sign of a leader who takes their time to think through the big issues, or is that more of a sign of political expediency?
Well, I believe that it's not so much a matter of deliberation as it is a matter of political calculation. Secretary Clinton has flip-flopped on many of the major issues of this race. Trans-Pacific Partnership I was against almost a year ago. She changed her position after giving 24 speeches in favor of it when it was in even, when the deal was even worse than it is now, and then suddenly changed her position like a week before the debates. I was against the Trans-Pacific Partnership because I felt that, building this, the Keystone Pipeline,
mm-hmm.
I was against that a year ago because I believe that pumping dirty tar sands oil from Canada across the country was not in the best security interests of our nation or the goal of a 100% clean energy future. Secretary Clinton supported that again right up until the debate and then switched her position on that. So Thomas Jefferson probably said it best when he said that on matters of fashion, you should swim with the current, but in matters of principle, you should stand like a rock. I've been able to get things done as a leader because I'm clear about my principles. And I find that even when people disagree with me, they can at least respect the fact that we have a difference of opinion, not a difference of political calculation. And I believe that the people of our nation want a leader that's going to be straight up with them about the challenges we face. It's really our only way that we're going to get things done.
So I have two more questions for you, Governor O'Malley. I read your proposal for making college debt-free for all Americans. This differs slightly from Senator Sanders' approach, which is to make college free for all Americans. Although it's a nuanced difference, it is a difference nonetheless. Do you feel as if your approach to do things like expanding Pell Grants and enhancing work-study opportunities is a rather tepid strategy in addressing the student loan and college affordability crisis in this country?
No, I don't, because I also have, as part of my plan, the ability for people to actually renegotiate those interest rates and loan forgiveness. I also have in my plan making national service a universal option for every kid in the United States. And I also have in my plan the improving high school education so that more of our kids get a year of college credit before they graduate from high school. And all of those reflect the fact that I've actually done this in the real world. Unlike Senator Sanders or Senator Clinton, I actually made college more affordable in my own state by going 4 years in a row without a penny's increase to college tuition. I understand that it's a combination of federal investments, state investments, and universities being flexible and creating multiple pathways for degree attainment that's going to get this job done. I also understand that while tuition is one part of the cost of college, that room and board can often be more than the cost of tuition. So my plan's actually more realistic, it's more comprehensive, and it doesn't run the danger that Senator Sanders' plan does of touching off hyperinflation in higher education by simply having Uncle Sam cut the check for tuition costs at public universities.
So I know you got to run, but I saved probably my toughest question for last, Governor O'Malley. Bernie Sanders recorded an album many years ago, and you're in a band and you can play the guitar. Is there any way the American people could see you two play a few songs together?
Are you kidding me? Bernie Sanders has a record?
Yeah, he's got an album.
No.
He's recorded an album. Yeah, you got to check it out.
Does he play?
He sings.
Does he?
Well, I don't know if you could call it singing, but he sung on this album.
Well, I think, look, music's all that keeps us here. So if we could find a way, maybe at the next debate they can have a talent show part of it.
And that would be your talent, playing with the good Senator Sanders.
Yeah, now I don't know if Secretary Clinton can play an instrument or sing those, so they'd have to check with Debbie Wasserman Schultz to see if those rules could be approved.
Well, if we can get Secretary Clinton to sit down with us, I'll ask her that question.
Yeah, I'm game for playing. I once put together a band at the DNC at the National Convention in Denver, and we had all on the stage at the same time. Myself, Brian Schweitzer, Janet Napolitano, and Tim Kaine, all in the same band. It was interesting.
Sounds like an impressive group of musicians.
Well, I don't know about that, but it was interesting.
Excellent.
And we had fun.
Excellent. Governor O'Malley, thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
sitting down
Stacey.
with Little Village. We appreciate it.
Thank you.